The concrete architecture of Los Angeles becomes both stage and metaphor in this confrontation between immigration protesters and law enforcement, where the elevated position of demonstrators challenges traditional power dynamics while highlighting the barriers immigrants face.
AP photographer Eric Thayer documents immigration reform protesters who shut down the 101 freeway in Los Angeles as law enforcement personnel establish a blockade below on February 2, 2025. This protest emerged amid intensifying national debate with demonstrators in multiple cities demanding reform following recent ICE raids and deportation actions.
It's really hard not to see this image as a kind of dramatization of the division the Trump administration is trying to create across the country. The photo really invites the viewer to note the contrast between what we might call official and vernacular roles, law enforcement positioned versus citizens' direct action, right? Those folks with the homemade signs and slogans. We are being asked to weigh in, to think about these two groups, come to terms with our own position. Everyone is looking essentially right at us, and we're being invited to consider and think about the issue.
If you compare it to this lower angle photo from the San Fernando Sun, which emphasizes the fencing and also the color and the flashing lights on the police vehicles, makes the photo feel a lot scarier, a lot more militarized. Like in this picture, the vertical composition creates this stark power dynamic, protesters occupying the high ground on the overpass, while law enforcement forms a militarized barrier below, representing the societal tension between grassroots movements and institutional authority. There's also light and dark, the contrast between the open sky above the protesters and the dark tunnel behind the officers, which creates this visual narrative about freedom versus confinement. And then what I think is really fascinating is you have this effect of a double row of people. So you get a sense of the protesters and immigrants coming in waves. That's waves of resistance, or it could be waves of immigrants seeking freedom.
I can't stop thinking about the idea of how infrastructure shapes not just communities in a material sense, but also our perceptions of communities. Thinking about the role of the freeway. Freeways historically have become ways to move through a community without seeing it or noticing its struggles. Interstates were often built through poorer communities, dividing them in two, destroying them. So taking the protests to the freeway, it's not only a visual interruption of public space, but it's a demand for the visibility of communities in a city where their needs and desires have often historically been ignored. I feel like there's a little punctuation mark at the end of this discussion, which is the graffiti on one of the pillars that reads "Si se puede," right? Yes, we can. Yes, it's possible.
And I think that the yes, we can is important to punctuate in a different way. I know a lot of people in this country are really scared, but a protest movement is growing. I think it's growing a lot faster than what you see in the corporate media and how much they're representing that resistance. It's really important to be looking at photography and progressive social media to see the back and forth that's really shaping